I can give you a brief overview of my field by talking about what I've called in the past Era 1, Era 2, and Era 3 medicine. Era 1 medicine is scientific medicine. It focuses on mechanical approaches to health and illness, drugs, surgical procedures, that sort of thing that we generally consider to be high-tech medicine. Era 2 medicine is mind-body medicine. It started gathering momentum after World War II. It was originally called psychosomatic disease. The basic idea is that your mind can affect your body. There's all sorts of evidence for this, of course. Peptic ulcers, duodenal ulcer disease, headaches, hypertension, and so on. Mind-body medicine has been pretty much accepted by now. But my latest passion and interest is what I call Era 3 medicine, or non-local medicine, which goes beyond even mind-body medicine. It suggests that, does Era 3 medicine, that our consciousness can affect not just our own personal bodies, that's Era 2, mind-body, but your consciousness, your thoughts, intentions, wishes, willings, and prayers, let's say, can affect the bodies of other people at a distance, even though they might not be aware that you're intending or wanting something healthful for them. This sounds absolutely outrageous to people who bump into this concept for the first time, but the only reason to propose it is because of data. There are empirical experiments now numbering in the hundreds that show that people can influence someone else at a distance, and that's just where the data takes us. It causes, granted, a tremendous amount of intellectual indigestion, and a lot of people who are frankly unfamiliar with the database. But I've been following this now for many, many years. I think the evidence is compelling. I think it is inarguable for people who have an open mind. My interest in it, however, is not because it helps us get better or make diseases go away, although it can do that. The main reason to pay attention to it is because of what it implies for the nature of our own consciousness, our own being, who we are innately. I believe that there's some profound implications of this non-local Era 3 medicine. There's some aspect of our consciousness that's infinite in space and time. Non-local is just a fancy word for infinite. So think of it this way. If there's something about our consciousness that's infinite in time, then it's immortal or eternal. That's one of the implications of the evidence for non-local medicine. Also, if our consciousness is infinite or non-local in space, then it's omnipresent. It's present everywhere. You know, this has some profound ethical implications that I think we need to pay attention to at this point in human history when we face so many global challenges. If our minds are in some sense infinite in space, that means you can't wall them off from one another, and in some dimension they come together to form what our ancestors used to call the universal mind, which some modern Nobel physicists have begun to refer to as the one mind, which Carl Jung, the great psychologist, called the collective unconscious and the collective conscious. So these ideas of the oneness of consciousness have been around for quite a while. The thing is that they just haven't been in fashion. That's changing, and it's changing because of the power of that little four-letter word, data. We're compelled to this new image of consciousness. I believe it is a non-dual view of consciousness. Non-local or infinite mind that's infinite in space and time, seems to me to be a restatement in modern lexicon of the idea of non-dual consciousness. So I think that what we're seeing here is a strange kind of dance and coming together with some ancient ideas of the oneness of consciousness and the absoluteness of mind and so on, with modern contemporary empirical findings from science. I mean, who would have thought it? I mean, in our memory, science and spirituality in the ancient wisdom traditions have been at loggerheads. So science, in a sense, has been shooting itself in the foot by producing evidence in favor of the things that it has so strenuously denied for a very long time, for about 3 centuries, as a matter of fact. Just as a single example, one of the great physicists of the 20th century, one of my heroes, Erwin Schrödinger, whose Schrödinger wave equations lie at the heart of quantum physics, was a dedicated, sincere Vedantist. He believed that there is one mind, that it's non-dual, that consciousness is the ground of everything. And so here's a man who is hardly a saffron-robed mystic, who is at the peak of modern 20th century physics, proclaiming that there is only a single mind that is absolutely non-dual. So it's odd that when you start looking at the history of modern science, you find that this idea of unitary consciousness is already part of the legacy of modern science. So I think it's not so much of a stretch to arrive at the notion of non-dual consciousness if we're willing just simply to open our minds. Still, it remains a matter of great intellectual indigestion for many scientists, of course. I keep quotations from skeptics who don't like this stuff. My favorite quotation is, "This is the sort of thing I wouldn't believe even if it were true." Just to give you a sample about how closed-minded and bigoted some even scientists can be. There are all sorts of pieces of evidence that point to non-locality of consciousness. As far as the non-locality of consciousness in time, there are now around 24 experiments called presentiment experiments that have been pioneered by people like Dr. Dean Radin at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, and that have been replicated now by various scholars around the world. These are computer-based experiments, and just to be very, very brief about this, the computer is going to show you an image. It will be one of 2 types. It'll be a lovely, serene image, or it'll be a horribly violent image, an autopsy or horrible trauma or something of that sort. The computer is going to make a randomized choice. You're sitting there having your stress response in your body measured in various ways, and here's the strange thing that happens. Seconds before the computer decides what kind of image it's going to show you, if the image that it's going to show you in the future is one of these violent images, your body, even before that, begins to register an exaggerated stress response. But not if it's going to show you the peaceful image. So how does your unconscious mind know what the computer is going to do in the future? This is very strange. It's utterly challenging. There have been no good rebuttals to these experiments. They've been replicated, as I say, around the world many, many times. And they show clearly and compellingly, in my judgment, that we have a sense of knowing the future. There's no other way to put this, I think. We can dress up the explanations and say information's coming from the future into the present, but it doesn't matter how we dress it up. The point is that in our see-touch-feel world, we're getting information from what we call the future. I think this is just one example about how consciousness manifests non-locally in time. There are now thousands and thousands of experiments online where people go to a website called gotpsi.org, gotpsi.org, and take premonition experiments. You have to guess what the computer is going to do, and there have been people now from almost every country in the world who participated in these millions of trials, and clearly people can do this. They can anticipate what the computer is going to do. The odds against chance in these experiments are billions and billions against 1. Remote viewing experiments, where someone goes off at a distance and someone stays put and tries to convey to them the contents of a message, and the people report it, and what comes through is compared with what was sent. In most of these experiments, the individual at a distance is able to get the information that's sent remotely, sometimes across global distances. And here's the interesting thing. In the majority of these experiments, the receiver gets the information up to a week before it's even sent, before a computer even randomly selects the message that's going to be sent later. So when you actually go looking for the ability of consciousness to act outside the present and at great distances and to defy space and time, you find it. It's there. One wonders why we have this ability. I think it serves a survival advantage. I think it makes profound biological sense. If you can imagine a creature that had the ability to see even just a little bit into the future, maybe seconds or just a brief amount of time, this would give them time to anticipate danger and avoid it and survive to propagate their genes. And evolutionary biologists say that if a naturally arising ability that came about through a mutation or some such contributes to survival and procreation, it's likely to become incorporated into our genetic structure, so that if we fast forward to current time, it just might be that almost every human being has this innate ability to some degree. There are prodigies. There are people who are profoundly gifted with this ability to see at great distances and into the future, just as there are prodigies in practically every area of human endeavor, whether it's athletics or mathematics or music or art and so on. I think that this has become embedded at the unconscious level, and one wonders why. I think it's wise that it has become embedded at a deep unconscious level. Many people operationalize these faculties without ever knowing they're doing it. They remain unconscious. There are profound case studies on record now where people avoid danger even in groups without having a conscious clue about why they're doing that. It only becomes apparent later when the disaster plays out and they've avoided it. I think it has to do with efficiency. Let's say that you had a premonition that you're going to have a car wreck going home and you have the option of going the usual way or taking an alternate route. Which would you do? You might get into an argument with yourself. You know, it's just a fantasy. You know, it's just a groundless fear. No, it's not. You know, I know stories where this turned out to save people's lives. So you get in this echo chamber where you're just arguing with yourself. This takes time. There are certain situations where that if you dally with this self-crosstalk, you may wind up doing yourself harm because you've taken too long to make the decision. When I was a battalion surgeon in Vietnam in 1968, I knew many young men who told me that they credited some sixth sense for the fact that they stayed alive. And I'll never forget, one of them said to me once, "Doc, it doesn't take long. A second will often do." So here you had it from, you know, naive soldiers, you know, but I think that if you were predict survival value for this kind of non-local precognitive knowing, you would expect it to show up in combat, because this is where the survival stakes are greatest. And when you look for it in that situation, that context, you find it. There are ways to develop this precognitive, premonitory sense, although, as mentioned, some people seem not to need to develop it. It just seems to be there in a prodigious way. But if you want to become more premonition prone, there are certain ways that have been shown to work. One is to keep a dream diary. These things often pop up in dreams, and often people, 5 minutes after they're awake, you know, they've lost the dream. So they never know that these things were dreamt about and might come true in the future. People find that if they write down their dreams immediately on awakening, it has some ability to freshen up their dream life. I've tried this, I can attest to it. The other way by far, I think, that's the most fruitful way to make yourself more premonition prone is to develop a discipline of meditation. If you correlate people's behaviors with their ability to score high on premonition tests, there's nothing like the correlation between meditation and performance successfully on these premonition challenges. So keeping a dream diary and being disciplined in meditation practice are two things that can make us more premonition prone. Well, the benefits of meditation are a huge hot topic in all areas of medicine now. Meditation increases the strength of the immunological responses in the body. Creativity is freshened and heightened in people who follow a meditative discipline. But the prize benefit for me is how it puts one in full light of awareness was what Jung considered one's life work all about. I think that's the primary benefit of meditation. It expands the vista of what we consider to be consciousness. It helps batter down those walls that keep us limited to the present moment and just to the private self. And it puts us in contact, as we were mentioning earlier, with that one mind that we're a part of, that unites us with all other consciousnesses, present, past, and future. We are talking about a new paradigm in medicine when we talk about the virtues of consciousness and spirituality and meditation and so on. There are several ways to approach this. I don't mean to suggest that we have to ditch and discard mechanical approaches to healing. There are instances where they are profoundly effective. Surgical operations are an example. I've benefited from those several times in my life. They were performed by surgeons who, as far as I could tell, didn't have a spiritual bone in their body, but they worked beautifully. I think the best treatment for appendicitis is surgery. I don't think it's meditation. I don't think it's distant spiritual healing. I think it's a scalpel and anesthesia. On the other hand, there are responses to the more sublime dimensions of consciousness which we don't understand very well, but which happen. I happen to be fascinated by what are called spontaneous remissions, so-called miracle cures, which science hasn't a clue about how they happen. There is no conventional physiological explanation for any of these things. They tend to come about because of changes in belief or faith or the compassion of love of one person toward another whom they're trying to heal. And these things is simply a matter of record. They defy biological explanation. Sometimes they occur overnight. There's no known theory about how they could occur, but there they are. We need desperately to understand how this sort of thing happens. We know certain spiritually oriented terms apply. I've mentioned them: compassion, caring, love of one person for another, belief in something. Oddly, it seems that one's religious preference plays no role whatsoever in any of these things. There are over a couple dozen randomized controlled studies now showing the ability of people through prayer and healing intentions to make a difference in the clinical outcome of people at a distance who may not even know that this is even going on. This is utterly mysterious. What it's driving us toward, I think, is a greater appreciation for the subtleties of what we call spirituality, the sense that we're connected with something higher than the individual self, and also a revised version of consciousness. The ability of consciousness to insert information out there in the world, and for that insertion of information to make a difference, often in terms of what we call better health or recovery from illness. This is what I've called Era 3 non-local medicine. It's all consciousness related, It suggests that consciousness is the ground of everything, that consciousness is non-dual, and that it's non-local. I think that this is the image of consciousness that we're in the process of living into. We're bumping against it solidly now. There's enough data out there so that we can safely say, look, this is not going away. This has to be part of our agenda of healing and medicine. So we are deep into the emergence of a new paradigm. It's not going to be discarding the conventional paradigm, but using it in a much wiser way.